A sleepy English village. A Victorian fountain that's always run clear. Until the morning it turns the color of weak tea and smells of bitter almonds. Miss Jane Marple, knitting on the green bench, watches the water swirl. By noon the fountain is drained, and a beautiful blonde actress lies dead in the silt, her skull cracked, a silver compact clenched in her fist. A midnight note signed B. A diamond earring hidden in powder. £500 and a blackmail photograph under the graving. 4 men with secrets, 1 florin that betrays the killer. In 8 crisp chapters, pride, love, and a single blow beneath the Michaelmas daisies unravel Willowbrook's perfect facade. 1 ripple, 1 murder, 1 truth. Chapter 1. The Ripple in the Pond. Willowbrook lay under a sky the color of washed pewter, the sort of morning that made the village look as though it had been sketched in charcoal and then lightly smudged. Smoke rose in straight, obedient columns from the chimneys of the cottages that crowded the single crooked street. The church clock, reliable to the minute, struck 9 with the resigned air of a man who has given the same warning for 2 centuries and expects no one to heed it. Miss Jane Marple sat on the green-painted bench that encircled the fountain, her small gloved hands occupied with a length of dove-gray wool. The needles moved with the unhurried precision of long practice, producing a lace pattern so fine that it might have been spun by spiders. She wore her usual dove-gray coat and the hat that had once been fashionable in 1923 and was now merely respectable. Nothing about her suggested urgency, yet her pale blue eyes missed nothing. The fountain itself was the pride of Willowbrook. Octagonal of blackened iron, it rose in 3 tiers, each basin smaller than the one beneath. Water usually clear as gin poured from the mouth of a dolphin held by a nymph whose expression had worn away under a century of rain. Today the flow was sluggish and the color of weak tea. A faint, bitter odor hung over the basin, noticeable even above the scent of damp leaves and the baker's warm bread. Colonel Bantry came stumping across the square, stick tapping the cobbles. His mustache, once the terror of subalterns in Poona, bristled with indignation. "Morning, Miss Marple." He halted, breathing like a winded charger. "Have you seen this disgrace?" "I have observed," she replied, not lifting her eyes from her knitting, "that the water is discolored." "Discolored? It's a positive soup. Council says iron in the pipes. I say rot. Someone's been tampering." He glared at the fountain as though it were a recalcitrant sepoy. "Mark my words, there'll be questions at the next parish meeting." Miss Marple inclined her head. "One recalls the trouble at Lower Bognor when the spring was polluted by a dead fox. The smell was quite distinctive." "Almonds," said the colonel unexpectedly. "I beg your pardon?" "Smells of almonds. Not fox." He gave a curt nod and marched off toward the post office, where Miss Hartnell was already sorting the second delivery with the air of one who knows everyone's secrets and files them alphabetically. Miss Marple's needles clicked once, twice. Almonds. Prussic acid smelled of almonds, though one hesitated to mention such things before luncheon. She glanced at the basin. A child's hoop leaned forgotten against the rim. A pair of mallards, usually resident, had taken themselves off to the duck pond behind the vicarage. Even the ducks found the fountain distasteful today. Mrs. Dane Calthorpe emerged from the churchyard, arms full of chrysanthemums for the fete. She was a tall woman with untidy hair, and the sort of face that looked as though it had been carved out of sympathy. Seeing Miss Marple, she crossed the square. "Jane, you'll catch your death. There's a wind off the downs." "I am fortified by curiosity," Miss Marple said. "Tell me, have you noticed anything unusual about the fountain?" "Only that it looks like oxtail soup. The vicar says we must pray for the pipes." Mrs. Dane Calthorpe's smile was sudden and transforming. "Though I suspect the pipes would prefer a plumber." A small group had gathered by the bakery, Mr. Pauk, the plumber himself, wiping flour from his hands. Young Mr. Harmon, the estate agent, sleek as a seal in his check suit. Miss Clark from the library, clutching a parcel of returns. Their voices carried the particular pitch of village excitement, half alarm, half relish. "Drain it before the fete," Mr. Pock was saying. "Can't have the mayor cutting a ribbon over mud." "Health hazard," agreed Miss Clark. "One reads of typhoid." Mr. Harmon lit a cigarette with a gold lighter. "Insurance nightmare. Suppose someone drank it?" Miss Marple rose, folding her knitting into a neat square. She moved with the unobtrusive grace of a cat that has decided the cream is worth investigating. At the edge of the basin she paused, peering into the murky water. Something glinted among the pennies and farthings, something larger, rectangular. A moment later it was gone, swallowed by a swirl. She straightened. The church clock struck the quarter. In 3 hours the square would be transformed. Trestle tables, bunting, the W.I. cake stall, the brass band from market basing. The fountain would be the centerpiece, garlanded with late roses and Michaelmas daisies. Whatever lay beneath the water would lie there still, hidden by flowers and festivity. Miss Marple returned to her bench. She took up her needles again, but her mind was busy with patterns of another sort. The pattern of a village that believed itself unchanging, and the small, lethal ripple that had begun with the smell of almonds on an autumn morning. Chapter 2. The Body in the Basin. The sun had climbed to its modest autumn height, and the square was filling with the bustle of preparation when the scream came. It was not a theatrical scream. Willowbrook had no taste for melodrama, but a short, practical sound, as though someone had trodden on a tin tack and discovered it was a nail. Mr. Pock, the plumber, stood halfway down the iron ladder inside the fountain, his boots on the lowest rung, his face the color of putty. One hand clutched the rim, the other pointed, trembling, at the basin floor. The water had been pumped out an hour earlier, leaving a damp, coin-strewn hollow that smelled of iron and wet stone. In the center lay a woman. She was on her face, one arm flung forward as if reaching for the dolphin's mouth, the other doubled beneath her. The green silk of her dress clung like a second skin, darkened to bottle color by the water. Blonde hair, loosened from its pins, floated in a pale fan across the silt. A single stocking had rolled to her ankle. The shoe was missing. The scream had come from Miss Clark, who now stood with both hands pressed to her mouth, the parcel of library books forgotten at her feet. Mr. Harmon dropped his cigarette into a puddle where it hissed and died. Mrs. Dane. Calthrop let the chrysanthemums fall in a bronze heap and crossed herself, an uncharacteristic gesture that spoke volumes. Miss Marple had been watching from her bench, knitting folded in her lap. She rose now, moving with the calm of one who has seen worse in cottage bedrooms and on battlefields long ago. The crowd parted for her as it might for a bishop or a midwife. "Stand back, please," she said, and her voice, though soft, carried the authority of a lifetime spent being obeyed. Mr. Pock, come up slowly. Do not disturb her further." The plumber obeyed, emerging like a man surfacing from a bad dream. His knees knocked against the iron rungs. At the top he sat down abruptly on the rim, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief that had once been white. "Dead," he said hoarsely. "Head all bashed in. I near put my hand in it." Colonel Bantry shouldered his way forward, mustache bristling like a hedgehog in defense. "Here, what's all this?" "Pock, you've been at the cider again." "No, Colonel." Mrs. Dane Calthrop's voice cut across him. "It is a woman, and she is beyond cider." Dr. Haydock arrived at a trot, medical bag swinging. He was a thin man with a stoop acquired from bending over too many kitchen tables. He knelt beside the basin, felt for a pulse he did not expect to find, and then gently turned the body so that the face was visible. The features were delicate, almost childlike in repose, but the left temple was a ruin of blood and bone. The green silk was torn at the shoulder. A bruise darkened the pale skin of the throat. One hand still clutched a silver compact, the mirror cracked in a starburst pattern. "Dead 6 to 8 hours. Haydock said, sitting back on his heels. Blow to the temple with something heavy and smooth. Not the fountain, edge too ridged. Possibly the ladle. He indicated the long-handled skimmer that lay discarded near the pump. And she was alive when she went into the water. See the froth at the mouth? Drowning after the blow, the crowd murmured, a sound like wind in dry leaves. Miss Marple noted who pressed forward and who hung back. Young Mr. Bantry, the colonel's nephew, had arrived in flannels and blazer, hair still damp from tennis. He stared at the body with the fixed intensity of a man watching his own future unravel. Mr. Redfern, the commercial traveler from the Blue Boar, stood a little apart, lighting another cigarette with fingers that trembled. Captain Allerton, retired Navy, had removed his hat and was turning it round and round as though winding a winch. Inspector Craddock pushed through from the direction of the police house, helmet tucked under his arm. He was a large young man with the earnest expression of one who has read all the textbooks and is about to discover they are insufficient. Name? He demanded of no one in particular. The mayor, Mr. Tomlinson, cleared his throat. He was a draper by trade and had the air of a man measuring everyone for a shroud. Lavra Grayson, actress, staying at the Blue Boar these 3 weeks. Came down from London for her health, she said. Health, repeated Colonel Bantry with a snort. Fast piece, if you ask me. Seen her tripping about in those London clothes. Not the sort Willowbrooks used to. Miss Marple's eyes rested on the colonel for a moment. One recalls, Colonel, that you were in the square yesterday afternoon. You spoke to her by the fountain. Did I? He looked startled. Well, yes, asked her to move her chair, blocking the view of the war memorial. Impertinent shit laughed in my face. Dr. Haydock was examining the compact. Powder, lipstick, and something else. He eased out a folded slip of paper with tweezers. Ink still wet, must have been protected by the case. The paper bore a single line in violet ink. Meet me at the fountain, midnight. Trust no one else. B. Craddock took it carefully. Initial B, any ideas? Basil Blake, said Mr. Harmon promptly. Film director. Staying at the Boar. He and Miss Grayson were thick as thieves till Tuesday. Then Rose heard them myself through the wall. Rose about what? Craddock asked. Money, mostly. She wanted backing for a play. He said she'd bled him dry already. Harmon's smile was thin. Artistic differences, he called it. Miss Marple had moved closer to the basin. The coins lay in a damp, glittering heap, farthings, sixpences, a half-sovereign that caught the light. She bent stiffly, peering at the silt. Inspector, if I may suggest, have the coins sifted. Something has been added since the water was last clear. Craddock looked doubtful, but signaled to Constable Trent, who began scooping the coins into an evidence bag with the enthusiasm of a child beachcombing. Mrs. Price from the Blue Boar had arrived, apron still pinned to her dress. Poor soul, she said, though her eyes were bright with the importance of being first with news. Kept herself to herself, mostly, but generous always, crisp fibers. Said she was waiting for a telegram that would change everything. What sort of telegram? Craddock asked. Didn't say? Only that it was from someone important. Mrs. Price lowered her voice. And she was frightened, Inspector. Last night she asked me to lock the side door after 11. Sighed she didn't want visitors. The church clock struck 12. The fete committee, hovering with bunting and trestle tables, looked stricken. The mayor mopped his brow. We'll have to cancel, he said. Can't have Morris dancers round a corpse. Nonsense, said Colonel Bantry robustly. Move her to the parish hall. Cover the fountain with a tarpaulin. Fate goes on raise money for the Spitfire Fund. Miss Marple turned away. She had seen what she needed. The position of the body, the angle of the head, the absence of struggle in the silt. Lavra Grayson had been struck from behind, probably as she leaned over the basin, perhaps to retrieve something, perhaps to read the note by moonlight. The murderer had then lifted her light work for a man and arranged her as though she slept among the coins. She walked slowly back to her bench. The knitting lay where she had left it, needles crossed like a promise. She picked it up, but her fingers were still. Across the square, young Mr. Bantry was being sicked behind the war memorial. Captain Allerton had replaced his hat and was staring at the fountain with the fixity of a man watching a torpedo track. Mr. Redfern had vanished altogether. Miss Marple began to knit again, slowly. The pattern was a complicated one, waves within waves, each dependent on the last. Somewhere in Willowbrook, she thought, a similar pattern was forming. A death, a note, a packet of crisp banknotes perhaps, and a murderer who believed the fountain had swallowed his secret with the water. The church clock struck the quarter. In the parish hall, Dr. Haydock would be washing his hands. In the police house, Inspector Craddock would be writing his first report. In the Blue Boar, Mrs. Price would be serving luncheon and telling the story for the first time of many. And beneath the tarpaulin that now covered the fountain, Laura Grayson lay waiting for justice, her green silk dress already stiffening in the autumn air. Chapter 3. The Guests at the Inn. The Blue Boar stood at the corner where the lane from the downs met the village square, a low, whitewashed building with a swinging sign that creaked in every wind. Its windows were small and diamond-paned. Its chimneys smoked with the comfortable smell of apple wood. On ordinary evenings, the tap-room was full of farmers discussing turnips and the price of wool. But this evening the talk was all of murder, and the farmers had been edged out by strangers. Miss Marple entered at 6:30, unremarkable in her gray coat and sensible hat. She had left her knitting at home. Tonight she carried only a small leather handbag, and the air of one who has come to return a library book. Mrs. Price, wiping tankards behind the bar, greeted her with the relief of a woman who has been asked the same question 40 times and welcomes a fresh audience. Miss Marple, you'll take a glass of sherry, I'm sure. Sweet or dry? Dry, if you please. And perhaps a word in the parlor, when you have a moment. The parlor was a narrow room with horse brasses on the beams and a fire that spat when the wind shifted. A single oil lamp burned on the mantel. The curtains were drawn against the dusk. Mrs. Price brought the sherry and shut the door with the air of one locking a confessional. "Now, ma'am," she began, settling herself opposite, "you'll want to know about Miss Grayson. Poor lamb, though lamb's not the word I'd have chosen a week ago." Miss Marple sipped her sherry. "One hears so many versions. I find it best to go to the source." Mrs. Price needed no further encouragement. She leaned forward, voice lowered to the pitch reserved for scandals and soup recipes. She came down from London 3 weeks ago, Tuesday, in a taxi from the station. 2 suitcases, real leather, and a hat box. Paid the driver double and never looked to see if he cheated her on the change. Said she wanted quiet. Quiet, with that laugh of hers you could hear in the kitchen. Was she alone? Started that way. Then the gentlemen began arriving. First, Mr. Redfern travels in wireless sets, he says. Flash cuffs, gold teeth, always humming tunes from the wireless. Took the room next to hers. Then Captain Allerton retired Navy, though you'd think he still had a quarterdeck from the way he gives orders. And last, Mr. Basil Blake, film director, if you please. Came in a sports car that sounded like a bomber. They all knew her from London, or said they did. Miss Marple turned her glass so that the lamplight caught the sherry's pale gold. And their relations with Miss Grayson? Mrs. Price's eyes gleamed. Thick and thin, then thin and thick. Mr. Redfern lent her money, fivers, tenors, once a 20-pound note, I saw myself. She'd laugh and call it petty cash. Captain Allerton brought her flowers from the Downsea pinks and such, and sat with her in the garden till closing time. Mr. Blake was different. Shouted. Threw things. Tuesday night I heard him through the wall. "You'll get nothing more, Lavra, not a penny." She laughed same laugh, and said, "You'll pay, Basil, or the world will know what you are." "Know what, precisely?" Mrs. Price shrugged. Something about a film that never got made. Money vanished, names in the papers. I don't follow pictures, but my niece in Basing sends me film fun. Mr. Blake's photograph is often in it, with ladies who wear less than their smiles. Miss Marple nodded. And last night? Miss Grayson dined in her room cold chicken and salad. Said she had a headache. At 10 o'clock, she came down in her green dress, the one they found her in, and asked me to lock the side door after 11. No visitors, she said, and looked over her shoulder like someone in a play. I locked it at 11 sharp. Heard nothing till the milkman at 5. Was the side door forced this morning? Not a mark. But the window in the pantry was unlatched. Cook swears she closed it. Anyone could have slipped through. A tap at the door interrupted them. Mr. Redfern put his head in, sleek hair gleaming with brilliantine. Mrs. Price, a whiskey and soda, oh. Beg pardon, didn't see you had company. His smile included Miss Marple, without warmth. Evening, ma'am. Dreadful business. Poor Laura. You knew her well? Miss Marple asked. In a manner of speaking. Business, mostly. She had ideas for a talking picture. Needed backing. He took the whiskey from Mrs. Price and raised the glass. To absent friends. He drank half at a swallow and left, humming. Mrs. Price watched him go. Nervous, that one. Hands shaking like a jelly. Miss Marple finished her sherry. And the others, Captain Allerton. Mr. Blake, where are they now? Captain's in the tap room, telling the colonel how they'd have handled it in the Navy. Mr. Blake went out after luncheon in his car. Said he had to see a man in Basing about a script. Hasn't come back. Miss Marple rose. You have been most helpful. One last thing, did Miss Grayson receive any letters or telegrams? Letters, yes. Telegrams, no. One came yesterday. Thick envelope, London postmark. She read it in the garden, then burned it in the stove. I found the corner in the ash had a crest on it, like a coat of arms. Thank you, Mrs. Price. You have a most observant eye. In the hallway, Miss Marple paused. The staircase was dark oak, worn hollow by generations of boots. On the landing, a door stood ajar. Inside, a chambermaid was turning down a bed. Miss Marple climbed slowly, counting the creaks. At the top she found 3 doors on the left, numbers 4, 5, and 6. Number 5 had a card in the brass holder. Miss L. Grayson. The chambermaid, a girl with freckles and a frightened air, bobbed a curtsy. Inspector's been and gone, miss. Took her things. Sighed we wasn't to touch. Quite right, Miss Marple said. But perhaps you can tell me, did Miss Grayson have any visitors in her room? Only the gentleman. Mr. Redfern most evenings. Captain Allerton brought her coffee once. Mr. Blake, well, he came in without knocking. They rode something fierce. And luggage? 2 suitcases under the bed, hat-box on the wardrobe. All gone now. Miss Marple thanked her and descended. In the hall, she met Captain Allerton emerging from the tap-room, face flushed with whiskey and indignation. Damned shame, he said, recognizing her. Pretty girl like that. Ought to string the fellow up. You knew her in London? Met her at a party. Charming creature. Needed looking after. His eyes slid away. Told her Willowbrook was too quiet for her sort. Yet she stayed. Waiting for someone, she said. Wouldn't say who. He touched his hat and went out into the night. Miss Marple stood a moment in the lamplight. 3 men, 3 motives. Money, love, fear of exposure. And a 4th, perhaps, the someone Laura Grayson had waited for. The someone who had sent the thick envelope with the crest. Outside, the square was dark, except for the police lamp over the tarpaulin-covered fountain. Miss Marple walked home past cottages where curtains twitched and voices fell silent as she passed. Willowbrook slept uneasily, dreaming of green silk and the smell of almonds. In her small sitting room she lit the lamp and took out a sheet of notepaper. At the top she wrote, Lavra Grayson visitors. Beneath she listed, Mr. Redfern money lent, nervous. Captain Allerton flowers, coffee, evasive. Mr. Basil Blake Rose, threats, absent. She paused, then added, unknown crest on envelope, telegram expected. She underlined the last line twice. Somewhere in London, or closer, a fourth player moved toward Willowbrook, drawn by the same ripple that had begun with discolored water and ended, for Lavra Grayson, in a basin of coins. Miss Marple folded the paper, placed it in her handbag, and went to draw the curtains. The fountain was hidden now, but she could hear the pump still working, sucking the last murky drops from the stone. Tomorrow the inquest. The day after, perhaps, the telegram that never came. She turned out the lamp. In the darkness, the creak of the Blue Boar sign carried across the square, a small, persistent sound, like a question that refused to be silenced. Chapter 4. The evidence of the coins. The parish hall smelled of varnish and damp himmels. A single electric bulb, unshaded, glared down on the trestle table where Constable Trent had spread the fountain's harvest. The coins lay in a shallow tin tray, farthings blackened with age, sixpences worn smooth, a few bright halfpennies from the coronation year. At one end, separated by a folded handkerchief, gleamed the florin Miss Marple had noticed new minted, 1951, its rim nicked as though by pliers. Inspector Craddock stood with his notebook open, pencil poised. Dr. Haydock, coat off and sleeves rolled, bent over the tray like a numismatist at auction. Miss Marple sat quietly on a rush-bottomed chair, hands folded in her lap, the picture of a lady waiting for the Mothers' Union to begin. 237 coins in all, Trent announced with pride. Counted twice, mostly copper, some silver. Total value 4 shillings and 9 pence halfpenny. Less the florin, Haydock said. That's 2 shillings extra. Mint scratch on the obverse see the groove? Magnet, I'd say someone fishing. Craddock tapped the florin with his pencil. Miss Marple noticed it yesterday. Claims it was added after the water turned brown. Miss Marple inclined her head. The water was clear on Wednesday morning. I watched the baker's boy toss in a penny at 8 o'clock. It lay on the bottom like a new penny in a Christmas pudding. By Thursday, the color had changed and the florin was there, bright among the dull. Someone placed it deliberately, or retrieved it, Haydock said. Look at the silt on the reverse still damp. It was under the body. Craddock turned to Trent. Any prints? Wiped clean, sir. But the ladle. He produced the long-handled skimmer, wrapped in brown paper. Blood and a hair. Blonde. Matches the deceased. The door opened and the mayor entered, mopping his brow with a silk handkerchief that had once been white. Press are at the gate, Inspector. Daily Clarion and the local rag. Want a statement? Tell them death by misadventure pending inquiry, Craddock said. And keep them away from the fountain. The mayor departed. Craddock closed his notebook. Right. We have a weapon, a coin that doesn't belong, and a note signed B. I'll have Blake in again. He was in London yesterday, says. He lunched at the Savoy. We'll check. Miss Marple rose. May I see the note again? Craddock handed it over. The paper was thin, the ink violet, the handwriting hurried but educated. Meet me at the fountain, midnight. Trust no one else. B. One observes, Miss Marple said, that the B is formed with a loop, like a film reel. Mr. Blake signs his letters that way. I have seen one on Mrs. Price's mantel. But the paper is from a hotel block. See the crest? The Blue Boar uses plain sheets. Haydock peered over her shoulder. Crest is a stag's head. The Crown at Market Basing uses that. Or any stationer in London, Craddock said. Still worth asking. Miss Marple returned the note. The compact interests me. May I? Haydock produced it from an envelope. The silver was dented. The mirror cracked in a spiderweb. Inside, the powder puff was sodden, the lipstick smashed. Beneath the puff lay a second slip of paper, smaller, folded twice. "Missed this," Haydock said ruefully. "Caught in the hinge." The paper was a till receipt from a London coffee stall. 2 coffees, 4 buns, 1 south, 8D, dated Tuesday, the day before the murder. 2 people, Miss Marple murmured. 1 paid. And a compact was in her hand. When she died, she was clutching it as though it mattered. Craddock made a note. "We'll trace the stall. Charing Cross. Looks like." The door opened again, and Colonel Bantry strode in, followed by his nephew. The young man's face was blotched, his eyes red-rimmed. "Inspector," the colonel barked, "my nephew has something to say?" "Out with it, Gerald." Young Mr. Bantry swallowed. I saw her Tuesday night, Miss Grayson. We walked by the fountain. She was upset, said someone was threatening her. I offered to speak to them. She laughed and said it was too late. Then she kissed my cheek and ran off. That was the last I saw of her." "What time?" Craddock asked. 10:30. "I went home straight home. Ask the housemaid." "We will," Craddock said. "Anything else?" The young man hesitated. "She dropped something." "A key. I picked it up, meant to return it yesterday, but—" His voice cracked. "I forgot." He produced a small Yale key on a red tag. Craddock took it. "Number?" 14. No address. Miss Marple's eyes rested on the key. "One recalls that the Blue Boar numbers its rooms up to 12. Perhaps a locker at the station. Or a left luggage office," Haydock said. Craddock pocketed the key. "We'll check both. Colonel, your nephew will remain in the village until further notice." The colonel bristled. "See here, my boy's no murderer. Routine," Craddock said firmly. When they had gone, Miss Marple asked, "The post-mortem?" "Tomorrow morning," Haydock said. "Stomach contents, etc. Though with the blow and the drowning, it's academic. Yet one likes completeness," Miss Marple said. "And the water in her lungs, fountain water?" "Murky as stew. I've sent a sample to the county analyst. Iron, vegetable matter, and something else sweetish. Almonds, perhaps." "Prussic acid?" Craddock asked sharply. "Too soon to say. But if someone tried poison first and failed—" Miss Marple shook her head. "The blow was from behind. She was bending over the basin, perhaps to read the note by moonlight, perhaps to retrieve the packet Mrs. Price saw her burn. The murderer struck, then lifted her in. The water completed the work." Craddock looked at the coins. "And the florin?" "A marker," Miss Marple said, "or a distraction. The murderer returned at dawn, when the pump was started, and fished with a magnet for something he had hidden earlier. The florin was his anchor bright, easily seen. But the body was in the way." Haydock whistled. "Clever. And the packet? Banknotes, perhaps? Or papers? Something worth killing for." Craddock gathered the evidence. "I'll have the fountain searched again under the grating, and Blake's alibi checked. Miss Marple, you'll keep your ears open?" "Naturally," she said. "One hears so much at the W.I." Left alone, Miss Marple examined the tray. She lifted the florin, turning it to the light. On the reverse, beneath the silt, was a faint scratch. L.G. She replaced it carefully. Lavra Grayson's initials, or a coincidence? In Willowbrook, coincidences were as rare as snow in August. Outside, the square was quiet under a sky the color of pewter. The tarpaulin over the fountain bulged slightly in the wind, like a shroud over a restless sleeper. Miss Marple walked home past the War Memorial, where a single chrysanthemum lay crushed on the step Mrs. Dane Calthrop's, perhaps dropped in the excitement. In her sitting room she added to her list, florin 1951, scratched L.G., magnet mark. Receipt 2 coffees Tuesday. Key 14, unknown lock. Water sample Swedish. She underlined water sample twice. Almonds again. Not in the air now, but in the fountain itself. Someone had poisoned the spring before the murder, perhaps to create confusion, perhaps to test the dose. Miss Marple drew the curtains. Tomorrow the inquest. The day after, the analyst's report. And somewhere in Willowbrook, a murderer counted the hours, believing the coins had sunk his secret with the body. But coins, like truths, have a way of rising to the surface when the water is stirred. Chapter 5. The Matter of the Compact. The inquest was held in the village hall at 10 o'clock on a morning sharp with frost. The benches were packed. Latecomers stood 3 deep at the back, stamping numbed feet and breathing white plumes. A smell of wet mackintoshes and coal smoke hung under the rafters. On the platform sat the coroner, Mr. Rilland from Market Basing, a small man with a voice like a creaking gate. Beside him Dr. Haydock waited, report in hand, and Inspector Craddock stood at ease, helmet under arm. Miss Marple had taken a seat near the front, between Mrs. Dane Calthrop and Miss Hartnell, the postmistress. She wore her black coat and a small jet brooch. Her gloves were folded neatly in her lap. No knitting today. The occasion demanded solemnity. The jury 7 local worthies, including Mr. Pauck the plumber and Mr. Tomlinson the mayor, shuffled in and were sworn. The body had been viewed in the mortuary. The fountain ladle lay on a side table, wrapped in brown paper like an unwelcome parcel. Dr. Haydock gave evidence first. His voice was dry, precise. Lovra Grayson, female, aged approximately 32. Cause of death: cerebral hemorrhage following a single blow to the left temple with a blunt instrument, consistent with the ladle exhibited. The blow rendered her unconscious. Death was completed by drowning. Water in the lungs matches the fountain sample. Time of death between 11 p.m. Wednesday and 2 a.m. Thursday. Stomach contents: cold chicken, lettuce, a little white wine. No poison. A rustle of disappointment ran through the hall. Miss Marple noted it. Villagers had hoped for arsenic in the salad. The coroner adjusted his pince-nez. Any other marks? Bruising to the throat, post-mortem, possibly from lifting the body. A small abrasion on the right palm, gravel or stone. Inspector Craddock was called. He described the discovery, the note, the florin, the key numbered 14. He produced the silver compact, now cleaned and gleaming. Found clenched in the deceased's hand. Contains face powder, lipstick, and a receipt dated Tuesday for 2 coffees and 4 buns at the Charing Cross coffee stall. The note Exhibit A was inside the lid. The note was passed along the jury. Miss Hartnell sniffed audibly. Mr. Pauck turned it over as though expecting a conjuring trick. Basil Blake was summoned. He entered with the swagger of a man who believes the world is a set built for his entrance. His camel hair coat was unbuttoned, his tie askew. He took the oath with a flourish. "You knew the deceased?" The coroner asked. "Intimately. Lavra was to star in my next picture. We quarreled artistic differences. Tuesday night I told her the deal was off. She threatened to sue. I left for London Wednesday morning, lunched at the Savoy with my producer, Mr. Lionel Price, returned this morning when I heard. Can you account for the note signed B?" Blake shrugged. "Anyone could write a B. I was in London." Mr. Price, summoned by telegram, confirmed the luncheon. The jury looked impressed. The Savoy was beyond their experience. Captain Allerton followed, upright in a navy reefer jacket. He admitted bringing Miss Grayson coffee on Tuesday evening. She was distressed, said someone was pressing her for money. I offered assistance. She refused. I left at 10:30 and walked on the downs till midnight, alone. Mr. Redfern was next. His cuffs flashed as he raised his hand to swear. He had lent Miss Grayson money, £300 in all, against a share in a film that never materialized. She promised repayment last week. When it didn't come, I pressed her. Tuesday we quarreled. I was in the tap room till closing. Mrs. Price will confirm. Went to bed at 11. Mrs. Price did confirm, adding that Mr. Redfern had asked for a bottle of whiskey to take upstairs. Half empty this morning, she said primly. Young Mr. Bantry gave evidence in a voice that shook. He had walked with Miss Grayson Tuesday night, received a kiss on the cheek, found the key. He had no idea what it opened. The coroner summed up. Death by person or persons unknown. The jury retired for 7 minutes and returned with a verdict of murder. Outside, the crowd spilled into the square. The fountain, still covered, looked like a catafalque. Miss Marple lingered on the steps, watching the witnesses disperse. Basil Blake lit a cigarette and strode toward his car. Captain Allerton spoke earnestly to the colonel. Mr. Redfern disappeared into the Blue Boar. Young Bantry stood alone, staring at the tarpaulin as though it might speak. Mrs. Dane Calthrop touched Miss Marple's arm. "Tea at the vicarage? You look frozen." "In a moment." "I must speak to Inspector Craddock." She found him in the vestry, packing evidence. "The key numbered 14, she said without preamble. "Have you tried the left luggage at Market Basing?" "Trent's there now." "Also the station here." "Nothing yet." "And the compact, may I see it again?" Craddock handed it over. The silver was worn from his pocket. Miss Marple opened it, removed the powder puff, and pressed gently on the base. A thin sheet of cardboard came away, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside lay a folded scrap of tissue paper. "Well, Craddock began. Miss Marple unfolded the tissue. A single diamond earring winked in the gaslight small, perfect, worth a year's salary to most of Willowbrook. "Hidden in plain sight," she murmured. She carried it always, against need. "One earring only curious. Pawned the other?" Craddock suggested. "Or given as a pledge. Diamonds are promises, Inspector. Someone broke theirs." She replaced the earring and closed the compact with a snap. The abrasion on her palm gravel from the path or from the basin floor. Basin floor. Silt and tiny stones. Then she was dragged, not carried. The throat bruises are from fingers, not lifting. A woman's weight is manageable, but awkward. The murderer pulled her by the ankles to the edge, then tipped her in. Craddock made a note. "Anything else?" The receipt. 2 coffees, 4 buns. She met someone Tuesday night after leaving young Bantry. Someone who paid. Someone she trusted enough to keep the receipt. Blake says he was in London by then. Mr. Blake says many things. The Savoy luncheon is convenient. One telegram to Mr. Price would establish it or disprove it. Craddock grinned suddenly. "You should be on the force, Miss Marple. One prefers the armchair, Inspector. But I will ask at the post office about telegrams sent from Willowbrook to London yesterday." She left him sealing boxes and walked across the square. The frost was melting. The tarpaulin dripped steadily. At the post office, Miss Hartnell was sorting the afternoon collection with the air of a priestess at an oracle. "Telegrams?" she repeated. "Only one yesterday. From the Blue Boar, 11:30 a.m. To a Mr. L. Price, Savoy Hotel. Text, lunch tomorrow as arranged. Urgent. Blake. Paid for by Mr. Blake himself. Tomorrow," Miss Marple said softly. "Yet the luncheon was today." Miss Hartnell's eyes gleamed. "Sharp, aren't you? Mind you, I thought it odd. But telegrams aren't my business-only delivery." Miss Marple thanked her and stepped outside. The church clock struck 1. In the vicarage garden, Mrs. Dane Calthrop was burning leaves. The smoke rose in a pale column against the sky. Over tea and seed cake, Miss Marple recounted the earring. The vicar's wife listened without surprise. Poor child. Running from something or to something. The diamond is a cry for help, Jane, or a bargaining counter. One earring buys little. The pair would buy freedom. Mrs. Dane Calthrop refilled the cups. And the fountain? Will they ever clean it properly? They must. But first the grating must be examined. Something lies beneath something the murderer tried to fish out with his magnet. The vicar's wife shivered. Evil leaves a stain. Miss Marple looked toward the square. Not evil, my dear. Fear. Fear is the stain. And fear makes mistakes. She finished her tea and rose. At the gate, she paused. Constable Trent was cycling up the lane, face red with news. Miss Marple. The key number 14. It opens a locker at Market Basing Station. Inside, a woman's handbag, crocodile, near new. Papers, lipstick, and a letter addressed to Miss Lara Grayson, care of the Blue Boar. Postmark London, Tuesday. Contents? Trent lowered his voice. £500 in 10s and 20s, and a note. More when you deliver the negative. Earn this. No signature. Miss Marple's eyes were very bright. The negative of what, I wonder? A photograph, perhaps. Something worth a life. She walked home through the dusk. The fountain's tarpaulin had been removed. The basin gaped empty, streaked with green. Tomorrow, the council would scrub it, fill it, garland it again. But tonight, it looked like a grave robbed of its secret. In her sitting room, Miss Marple added to her list. Diamond earring one only. Handbag £500. Note about negative. Telegram sent yesterday for lunch today. Dragged Mark's ankles. She drew a line beneath. Patterns within patterns. A woman who hid diamonds and burned letters. A man who forged alibis with telegrams. A packet of money and a promise of more. Miss Marple turned down the lamp. Outside, the wind stirred the Michaelmas daisies around the empty basin, and the dolphin's mouth, dry for the first time in a century, seemed to whisper a name no one had yet spoken. Chapter 6. The nephew's alibi. The colonel's house stood on the hill above Willowbrook, a square red-brick box with a portico that had once been white. On the morning after the inquest, the frost still lay thick on the lawns. The gravel crunched under Miss Marple's stout shoes as she walked up the drive. She had been invited to coffee, an invitation delivered by the colonel's housemaid with the air of one bearing a royal summons. Inside, the hall smelled of beeswax and gun oil. A stuffed fox glared from the staircase. A barometer on the wall promised set fare with the optimism of the long dead. The housemaid took Miss Marple's coat and ushered her into the gun-room, where Colonel Bantry stood over a tray of coffee cups, mustache bristling like an angry hedgehog. "Morning, Miss Marple." "Sit you down. Damned business, this. My nephew's in a state." Young Gerald Bantry was indeed in a state. He sat on the edge of a leather chair, hands clasped between his knees, eyes fixed on the Persian rug as though it might offer escape. His flannels were creased, his hair unbrushed. A half-empty cup of coffee cooled beside him. "Miss Marple," he said, rising with the mechanical courtesy of the public school boy. "Uncle said you were coming." I don't know what to say." "Say nothing for the moment," Miss Marple replied, accepting a cup from the colonel. "Drink your coffee, Mr. Bantry. You look as though you need it." The colonel cleared his throat. "Gerald's told the police everything. Walked with the girl Tuesday night. Found a key. Nothing more. But Craddock's sniffing round like a terrier after rats. Wants to know where the boy was Wednesday night. I was here," Gerald said quickly. "In bed by 11. Housemaid brought cocoa." The colonel snorted. "Housemaid's a fool. Can't tell 11 from midnight." And the side door was unlatched. Anyone could have slipped out. Miss Marple sipped her coffee. It was strong and bitter, the way the colonel liked it. "Let us be precise, Mr. Bantry. You left Miss Grayson at what time?" 10:30, perhaps a quarter to 11. She was going back to the Blue Boar. I walked to the War Memorial and turned up the lane. That was the last I saw of her. And the key? Dropped from her bag. I picked it up, meant to return it Thursday morning, but he flushed. I overslept. Then the news came. Miss Marple set her cup down. "You are fond of her?" Gerald's flush deepened. I thought I was. She was kind to me. Laughed at my stories about Malaya. Said I was a nice change from London types. The colonel refilled his own cup noisily. "Nice change. Fast piece, if you ask me." Led the boy a dance. Miss Marple ignored him. Did she speak of her troubles? Only that someone wanted money. Said she had something they needed, a negative, whatever that is. She was frightened, Miss Marple. I offered to confront the fellow. She laughed and said it was too late. Too late for what? I don't know. She kissed my cheek suddenly, like a sister, and ran off toward the inn. Miss Marple's eyes rested on the gunroom walls. Shotguns in racks, a cabinet of cartridges, a photograph of the colonel with a dead tiger. You keep a revolver, Colonel? Service Webley. Locked in the drawer. Gerald knows where the key is. Gerald started. I never touched it. No one suggests you did, Miss Marple said mildly. But let us consider Wednesday night. You say you were in bed by 11. Who else was in the house? Uncle, the housemaid, cook. The daily girl had gone home. And the side door? Unlocked till midnight. Cook's habit, she airs the pantry. Miss Marple rose and walked to the window. The view looked down over the village. The church spire, the square, the fountain, now scrubbed and empty. A man could leave by the side door, cross the garden, climb the low wall, and be in the square in 7 minutes. Return the same way before dawn. She turned. Mr. Bantry, did you hear anything that night? A car, perhaps? Or the pump starting? Nothing. I slept badly, kept thinking of Laura. At 2 o'clock, I went to the bathroom. The house was quiet. The colonel slammed his cup down. See here, Miss Marple, my nephew's no murderer. He's a Bantry. We don't skulk about bashing women with ladles. Miss Marple smiled gently. Of course not. But murderers are not always skulkers, Colonel. Sometimes they are young men in love, or in fear of disgrace. Gerald went white. Disgrace? The key, Mr. Bantry. Number 14. It opened a locker containing £500 and a note about a negative. Miss Grayson was blackmailing someone or being blackmailed. You gave her the key, perhaps? No, I told you. She dropped it. Yet you kept it. Why? I don't know. I thought it might be important. The colonel intervened. Enough, Gerald. Miss Marple, if you've finished your inquisition. One more thing. Miss Marple opened her handbag and took out the diamond earring wrapped in tissue. Do you recognize this? Gerald stared. It's Laura's. She wore a pair, said they were all she had left of her mother. Lost one in London, she told me. Where did you find it? In her compact, hidden. The pair would be worth a great deal. One earring buys little. Gerald's hands trembled. She was selling them. Sighed she needed money to get away. I offered to buy the single one, give it back to her later. She laughed and said it was too late. Miss Marple wrapped the earring again. Thank you. You have been most helpful. In the hall, the housemaid was polishing the fox's glass eyes. Miss Marple paused. Elsie, isn't it? You brought Mr. Gerald cocoa on Wednesday night? Yes, miss. 11 o'clock sharp. He was in his dressing gown, reading Punch. Was the side door locked then? Cook locks it at midnight. I heard her turn the key. And in the morning? Unlocked again. Cook opens it for the milkman at 5. Miss Marple thanked her and walked down the drive. The frost was melting. Rooks wheeled over the churchyard. She paused at the gate. From here, the fountain was hidden by the war memorial, but she could see the Blue Boar sign creaking in the wind. Back in the square, she met Inspector Craddock, coming from the police house. Miss Marple, I was coming to find you. A negative county lab developed it. Photograph of a man in evening dress, handing an envelope to a woman in a fur coat. Back of a nightclub, looks like. The man's face is clear Captain Allerton. Miss Marple nodded. And the woman? Turned away? But the coat matches one in Miss Grayson's luggage. Blackmail, Miss Marple said. The £500 was a first payment. The negative was to be delivered Wednesday night. But someone else wanted it destroyed. Blake? Craddock suggested. Or Redfern, or young Bantry. The key was in his possession. He could have arranged to meet her. struck her when she bent to hide the negative under the grating. Craddock frowned. But the money was still in the locker. Exactly. The murderer was interrupted, perhaps by the pump starting at dawn. He hid the body, weighted it with coins, and returned later with his magnet. The florin was his marker. They walked toward the fountain. Workmen were filling it. Clear water poured from the dolphin's mouth, washing away the last green stains. Gerald Bantry's alibi is thin, Craddock said. Side door unlocked till midnight. He could have slipped out, met her at 11:30, killed her, been back by 1. Yet the housemaid saw him at 11, and he is not a cool murderer, Inspector. Look at his hands, they shake. A man who strikes from behind and drags a body needs nerve. Craddock conceded the point. Then who? Miss Marple watched the water rise. Someone who knew the pump started at dawn. Someone who knew the grating could be pried. Someone who had access to the fountain before the fate. A workman called to Craddock. Inspector. Found something under the grating. They hurried over. The man held up a sodden packet wrapped in oilskin. Inside, 5 crisp 100-pound notes and a second negative identical to the first. 2 negatives, Craddock said. She kept a copy. Miss Marple's eyes were bright. Insurance. She intended to deliver one and keep the other. But the murderer took neither. He was after the money. She looked toward the blue boar. Someone was watching her, Inspector. Someone who knew her habits, her fears, her hiding places. Craddock pocketed the packet. I'll have Allerton in again. And Blake's telegram post office confirms it was sent yesterday for lunch today. Price says Blake never showed. Miss Marple nodded. Patterns, Inspector. The nephew's alibi is weak, but honest. The captain's is strong, but false. Find the man who was in 2 places at once. She walked home past the fountain, now sparkling in the pale sun. Children were already tossing pennies into the clear water. The Michaelmas daisies had been replaced. The fate would go on after all. In her sitting room, Miss Marple added to her list. Negative Allerton, nightclub. Second negative plus 500 pounds under grading. Gerald Coco 11 p.m. P. earring offer. Side door unlocked till midnight. She drew a small circle around earring offer. A young man in love offers to buy back a jewel. A murderer offers to silence a threat. Outside, the church clock struck 3. Somewhere in Willowbrook, a man counted stolen minutes, believing the fountain had swallowed his guilt with a second negative. But water, like truth, has a way of rising. Chapter 7. The fountain's secret. The fountain was clean again, its water bright as gin, but the square felt different on the Saturday morning after the inquest. The bunting for the autumn fete had been taken down, the trestle tables folded away. Only the brass band still practiced in the churchyard, the trombonist wheezing through Colonel Bogey as though nothing had happened. Miss Marple walked slowly past the bakery, nodding to Mrs. Price, who was sweeping the step with unnecessary vigor. Morning, ma'am. They say the water's safe now. Counsel tested it twice. Very thorough, Miss Marple murmured. One wonders what they found the first time. Mrs. Price leaned on her broom. Iron, they said, and a trace of something sweet. Gone now, though. Pump ran all night. Miss Marple continued to the fountain. The basin was full. A child's hoop floated on the surface like a lazy duck. She studied the iron grating at the bottom newly painted, but the screws showed fresh scratches. Someone had been here since the workmen left. She glanced round. The square was empty save for Mr. Pock locking his van. Miss Marple descended the iron ladder with the caution of one who has seen too many falls in cottage kitchens. The water lapped at her ankles. Her stockings would be ruined, but truth was worth a pair of lisle. At the bottom she knelt, skirts gathered. The grating lifted easily. Beneath lay a shallow cavity lined with stone. Empty now, but the silt was disturbed, and a single coin of bright 1951 florin lay, wedged in a crack. She pocketed it. Above, a voice called, Miss Marple. You'll catch your death. Inspector Craddock stood at the rim, helmet in hand. He helped her out, water dripping from her hem. Found this, she said, showing the florin. Our friend's marker. He returned last night after the punk stopped. Craddock turned the coin over. Same scratch. LG, he's persistent or desperate. The second negative and the money are with you. He knows that now. They walked to the police house. Inside, the evidence lay on Craddock's desk. The 2 negatives, the oilskin packet, the diamond earring, the Yale key, the ladle wrapped in paper. Craddock added the florin. Captain Allerton's in the cells, he said. Caught trying to board the London train with a suitcase full of fivers. Claims they're his savings. We'll see. And Mr. Blake? Still in London, or says he is. Telegram came this morning, script approved. Stay put. Price. Sent from the Savoy yesterday. Miss Marple studied the telegram. Convenient. One wonders who sent it. Craddock grinned. Post office is checking the sender. Meanwhile, young Bantry's housemaid confirms the cocoa at 11. But the side door was unlatched till midnight. Cook admits she forgot to lock it. Miss Marple sat down. Let us reconstruct. Wednesday night. Laura Grayson leaves the Blue Boar at 10:30, asking for the side door to be locked at 11. She has the negative, the money, the diamond. She meets someone at the fountain, someone she trusts enough to bend over the basin, perhaps to hide the packet under the grating. The murderer strikes with the ladle, drags her by the ankles, tips her in, weights the skirt with coins so she sinks, then hides the packet and leaves, but returns at dawn, Craddock said, with a magnet on a string. The florin is his marker. He fishes, but the body is in the way. The pump starts, he flees. Exactly. He returns last night, pries the grating, finds nothing. Leaves the florin in panic. Craddock capped the desk. Allerton was on the Downs till midnight, says he was alone. Redfern was in the tap room till 11, then took whiskey upstairs. Blake claims London. Bantry in bed by 11. Someone's lying. Miss Marple took out her list. Let us consider motive. Allerton blackmailed. The photograph shows him paying a woman in a fur coat. Redfern lent money, threatened exposure. Blake film deal collapsed, public quarrel. Bantry love, perhaps jealousy. She paused, but only one knew the pump started at dawn. Only one could fish with a magnet without being seen. Craddock frowned. The plumber, Pauk? Mr. Pauk drained the fountain Thursday morning. He found the body. But he was not here Wednesday night. Miss Marple rose. I must see the grating again. In daylight, they returned to the fountain. The water had been turned off. The basin half empty. Miss Marple pointed to the iron ladder. See the rust? Fresh scratches here and here. Someone climbed down twice. Once to hide, once to retrieve. Craddock examined the scratches. Boot nails. Heavy boots. Or shooting boots, Miss Marple said softly. The colonel keeps a pair in the gun room. Craddock stared. You're not suggesting no, but young Mr. Bantry wears the same size. And the side door was unlatched. They were interrupted by Constable Trent cycling up, breathless. Sir, message from Market Basing. The crocodile handbag fingerprints. 3 sets. Miss Grayson's, Mr. Redfern's, and Captain Allerton's. Craddock whistled. Allerton handled the bag, yet he claims only to have brought her coffee. Miss Marple's eyes were bright. The bag was in the locker. The key was dropped Tuesday night. Young Bantry picked it up. Someone took it from him, or he gave it willingly, then returned it to Laura's bag before she left the inn. Craddock turned to Trent. Bring Redfern in and Allerton. We'll have them together. At the police house, Redfern arrived first, cuffs flashing, face pale. Allerton followed, handcuffed, naval coat unbuttoned. They eyed each other with mutual dislike. Craddock laid the handbag on the table. Your prince, gentlemen. Explain. Redfern spoke first. I gave her the bag. Present. Last week. Naturally, my prints are on it. Allerton shrugged. She showed it to me Tuesday. Asked if crocodile was vulgar. I said it suited her. Touched the handle. Miss Marple watched their faces. And the £500? Redfern flushed. My money. Lent in good faith. She was to repay with the film profits. Allerton laughed. Profits? She had no film. She had photographs. That's what the money was for silence. Craddock produced the negatives. This you, Captain? Paying a woman in a fur coat? Allerton's jaw tightened. Blackmail. The woman was Lavra. She threatened to send the photograph to my wife. I paid the first installment Tuesday night, met her at the coffee stall. Gave her the crocodile bag with the money inside. She was to deliver the negative Wednesday. But she kept a copy, Miss Marple said. Insurance, Allerton nodded. I discovered the copy Thursday morning too late. Someone got there first, Redfern interrupted. I was in the tap room Wednesday night. Ask Mrs. Price. She confirms till 11, Craddock said. Then you took whiskey upstairs. Your room overlooks the square. You could see the fountain. Redfern's hands shook. I looked out once. Saw nothing. Went to bed. Miss Marple leaned forward. Mr. Redfern, you lent money. You were ruined if the film failed. You quarreled Tuesday. You knew she met someone at midnight. Perhaps you followed. Redfern's voice rose. I did not. I was drunk whiskey and soda. Ask the chambermaid. She heard me snoring. Allerton smiled thinly. Convenient snores. Craddock silenced them. Enough. You'll both stay here till we check. When they had gone, Miss Marple said, the chambermaid heard snoring. But a man can snore and still be elsewhere if the window is open and the night quiet. Craddock nodded. Redfern's window faces the square. Rope ladder, perhaps. Or the drain pipe. They returned to the Blue Boar. Mrs. Price led them to Redfern's room. The window was open 6 inches. The sill showed scratches. Beneath, the drain pipe ran straight to the ground. Climbed down, Craddock said. Met her at the fountain. Struck her. Hid the packet. Returned before dawn. But the money was in the locker, Miss Marple reminded. He didn't take it. Interrupted. Or he wanted the negative more. Miss Marple looked out the window. The fountain was visible, the grating clear in the sunlight. He watched her hide the packet, waited till she bent over, struck, then dragged her in. But the pump started, he fled. Returned last night, found nothing. Craddock closed the window. We'll confront him. In the parlor, Redfern sat hunched, whiskey glass empty. All right, he said wearily. I saw her from the window. She met someone man in a dark coat. They argued. She bent over the grating. He struck her once. She fell. He lifted her in, weighted the skirt with coins from his pocket, then hid something under the grating and left. Who was the man? Craddock demanded. I couldn't see. Too dark. But he walked toward the hill, the colonel's house. Miss Marple's eyes met Craddock's, young, bantry. But Redfern continued. I was afraid. If I spoke, my debt would come out. I climbed down later, tried to fish with a magnet. The florin was my marker, but the body, she was in the way. I panicked. Craddock handcuffed him for withholding evidence. An attempted theft, Redfern sagged. I never killed her. I loved her in my way. Miss Marple turned away. Love, debt, fear threads in the same web. Outside, the church clock struck 4. The fountain sparkled innocently. But beneath the grating, the cavity was empty, and the true secret had risen with the water only, to be spoken in the final unmasking. Chapter 8. The Unmasking. The village hall had been cleared of fate debris and set with rows of plain wooden chairs. A single table stood at the front, behind which sat Inspector Craddock, notebook open, face grave. At his right, Dr. Haydock polished his spectacles. At his left, Constable Trent guarded a tray of exhibits beneath a white cloth. The room was full but silent. No rustle of programs, no cough of anticipation. Willowbrook had come to hear justice spoken aloud. Miss Marple entered last, unhurried, and took the chair reserved for her beside Mrs. Dane Calthrop. She wore her black coat and the jet brooch. Her gloves were folded in her lap like resting doves. The clock above the door showed 10 minutes past 2. Craddock rose. "This is not a court of law," he began, "but a reconstruction of events leading to the murder of Laura Grayson. All persons concerned are present." They were. Colonel Bantry sat ramrod straight in the front row, mustache bristling. Young Gerald Bantry beside him looked as though he had not slept since Tuesday. Captain Allerton, coat buttoned to the throat, stared at the floor. Mr. Redfern, pale and unshaven, twisted a cigarette unlit between his fingers. Basil Blake lounged at the back, arms folded, a sneer ready. Mrs. Price, Miss Hartnell, Mr. Pauk, and half the parish filled the benches behind. Craddock lifted the cloth. The ladle, the florin, the negatives, the oilskin packet, the diamond earring, the Yale key, the crocodile handbag, each item placed with care. "Wednesday night," Craddock said. "Laura Grayson left the Blue Boar at 10:30, asking the side door to be locked at 11. She carried the handbag containing £500 and one negative. She had arranged to meet someone at the fountain at midnight. That someone killed her." He paused. "We know the blow was struck from behind with this ladle. We know the body was dragged by the ankles gravel in the palms, bruises on the throat, and tipped into the basin. Coins weighted the skirt. A packet second negative and money was hidden under the grating. The murderer returned at dawn with a magnet. The florin was his marker. He was interrupted by the pump and fled. He returned last night and found the cavity empty." Colonel Bantry stirred. "Get on with it, man. Who?" Craddock ignored him. 4 men had motive. Captain Allerton blackmailed. Mr. Redfern ruined by debt. Mr. Blake threatened with exposure. Mr. Gerald Bantry love turned to jealousy. Gerald flinched. Blake laughed softly. "But only one," Craddock continued, "knew the pump started at dawn. Only one could climb from a window, strike, hide, and return unseen. Only one left boot-nail scratches on the ladder and drainpipe." He turned to Redfern. "You saw the murder from your room. You climbed down later, tried to fish with a magnet, panicked. But you did not strike the blow." Redfern nodded, eyes on the floor. Craddock faced Allerton. "You paid the first installment Tuesday night at Charing Cross. You believed the negative destroyed. You were on the downs till midnight alone. No one saw you." Allerton said nothing. "Mr. Blake," Craddock said, "your alibi is a telegram sent by yourself from the Savoy to yourself at the Savoy. Mr. Price never lunched with you. You were in Willowbrook Wednesday night." Blake shrugged. "Prove it." Craddock lifted the oilskin packet. "Your fingerprints are on the inner wrapper. You handled this money." Blake's sneer faltered. Craddock turned to Gerald Bantry. "You picked up the key Tuesday night. You offered to buy the diamond earring. You were in love. But you were in your room at 11 Cocoa, housemaid, Punch magazine. The side door was unlatched till midnight. You could have slipped out." Gerald's voice cracked. "I did not." Miss Marple rose. The room stilled. Even the clock seemed to listen. "Inspector Craddock has the facts," she said quietly, "but not the pattern. Let me complete it." She moved to the table. "Laura Grayson came to Willowbrook to sell a negative Captain Allerton, paying a woman in a fur coat. She kept a copy for assurance. She demanded more money. The murderer agreed to meet at midnight, bringing the ladle to skim Leaves' innocent pretext. She lifted the ladle. The blow was struck as she bent to hide the second packet under the grating. The murderer dragged her by the ankles, hence the gravel in the palms, and tipped her in. He weighted the skirt with coins from his pocket coins he had collected earlier, knowing the fountain would be drained at dawn. She placed the ladle down. He returned with a magnet on a string. The Florin knew bright was his marker. But the body blocked the grating. The pump started. He fled. He returned last night, found nothing. She turned to the colonel. Colonel Bantry, you spoke to Laura Grayson on Tuesday. You asked her to move her chair from the war memorial. She laughed in your face. You are a proud man. You do not like being laughed at. The colonel's mustache twitched. What of it? You collect coins, Miss Marple said. You have a cabinet in the gunroom. Among them, a 1951 Florin new, uncirculated. You gave it to your nephew to post in the fountain for luck before he returned to Malaya. He forgot. It was in his pocket Wednesday night. Gerald stared. Uncle, Miss Marple continued. You, Colonel, were in the square Wednesday evening. You saw Lavra meet someone, saw the quarrel. You followed. You struck her with the ladle you carried to skim leaves for the fete. You dragged her, hid the packet, weighted the skirt with your nephew's coins, including the florin. The colonel rose, purple-faced. Damned nonsense. I was home by 10. Miss Marple lifted the florin. Your fingerprints are on this coin, Colonel. You handled it Tuesday when you gave it to Gerald. You took it back Wednesday night, used it as a marker. She turned to Craddock. The boot nail scratches on the ladder matched the colonel's shooting boot size 9, studded. They are in the gun room now, wet from last night's dew. Craddock signaled. Constable Trent left and returned with the boots, mud on the soles, rust on the studs. The colonel sat down slowly. She laughed at me, he said, voice suddenly old, in front of the memorial, my memorial. Sighed I was a pompous old fool. I lost my temper. The ladle was in my hand. One blow. She fell. I panicked. Hid her in the fountain. Thought the water would cover it till after the fete. Gerald buried his face in his hands. Miss Marple's voice was gentle. You returned at dawn, Colonel, to retrieve the packet. But the body was there. You fled. Last night you tried again, found the police had taken everything. The colonel looked at the tray of exhibits. The money was hers by right. Allerton's bribe. I wanted it for the Spitfire Fund. Craddock stepped forward. Colonel Arthur Bantry, I arrest you for the murder of Laura Grayson. The colonel stood. His shoulders sagged, but he held his head high. Carry on, Inspector. I'll not make a scene. He was led away. The hall was silent. Gerald Bantry wept without sound. Captain Allerton stared straight ahead. Redfern lit his cigarette at last. Blake slipped out the back door. Miss Marple resumed her seat. Mrs. Dane Calthorpe pressed her hand. Outside, the fountain spouted clear water into the autumn sun. Children tossed fresh pennies. The Michaelmas daisies nodded in the breeze. Willowbrook would talk for a month, then fold the story away like a best frock and go on. In her cottage, Miss Marple took up her knitting. The dove-gray wool grew into a shawl waves within waves, each stitch dependent on the last. She thought of a colonel's pride, a girl's laughter, a florin bright among the dull. Such a pity, she murmured to the empty room. The daisies will be drooping by tomorrow. But the fountain flowed on, and the village, like all villages, forgave its own and waited for the next dropped stitch.